Hi, parents. Thanks for tuning in. I'm glad that you guys want to learn how to have a healthy conversation with your kid. We're going to hit a lot of really good ideas that you can implement into your family life to make sure that you and your kids are communicating. When we talk about this idea of having conversations with our kids, it is super important that we understand that for our kids to understand what it means to have a relationship with God, for them to learn about that, it's got to come from you. It is a big responsibility for us as parents to help teach our kids what it means to love God and to follow Jesus. There's a sociologist out there that recently I was just reading some of his work. His name is Christian Smith, and he's a sociologist on faith and building a faith in this rising generation. And he says this. Let me read it to you. The good news is that among all possible influencers, parents exert far and away the greatest influence on their kids' religious outcomes. The bad news is that nearly all human responsibility for the religious trajectory of our kids' lives falls on the shoulders of their parents. The empirical evidence of this is clear. So, good news, you have the influence that it takes to teach your kids what it means to love God and to follow Jesus. Bad news, a lot of that responsibility, most of it is on you. Now, as a church, as a parent ministry leader, me and my team, we are here to help you guys. We want to build you up so you can be that biggest influence, so you can guide your kids, but we can't do it for you. It is on you. Part of you being able to do that is to be able to create conversations with your kids, to create an environment in your family where you and your kids can have real conversations and they can learn what it means to love God and to follow Jesus. Hopefully, this class and some of the pieces of advice that I'm going to give you in some following bits are going to help you with that. As we move into this idea that conversations with our kids are healthy, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just coming up with this on my own and making it up. And so when I was trying to go to scripture for some guidance, one of the scriptures that we seem to land on quite a bit is that Deuteronomy 6:5-7 says something along the lines of repeat these commands to your kids while you're at home, on the road, going to bed, and getting up. And it's that idea that we're kind of building into our whole family parent ministry. It's this idea that if you talk about God all the time and it's really no big deal to bring God into the conversation, that's when God does become a big deal, because he becomes a part of our everyday life. So this scripture that talks about the traditional Jewish family from the Old Testament, talking about God's commands and saying, hey, make sure you're teaching your kids these when you get up, when you eat, when you walk on the road, when you go to bed. Basically, to me, that makes it sound like you're talking about it all day long, all the time. Not just on Sabbath day or on church day or on youth group night, but on all nights, all days during the course of the day. So I think that's something that we can lean on and say, yeah, that's kind of biblical. Having these ongoing conversations with our kids so they can learn about God and having a relationship with Him. There's also a couple other interesting passages that teach us how to do this in the sense of being aware of our attitudes. One of them is from Colossians. It's 3:21. It says this: do not aggravate your kids or they will be discouraged. Aggravate means to annoy or to persistently make a problem worse. So make sure that you're parenting in a way, that you're having conversations in such a way that you're not aggravating your kids. Now, I know there's going to be times where that's going to happen. You're doling out some punishment when they come home late or they won't eat their vegetables, whatever it might be. But just remember to have the attitude that Scripture is telling us. Don't be doing things in such a way that you're frustrating your kids, that you're aggravating them. I think if that's kind of our normal MO and that's the kind of vibe we're creating in our families, we're not creating opportunities to have healthy conversations. There's another passage that really says about the same thing. It's from Ephesians 6:4, and it says, do not make your kids angry. Raise them with training and teaching from the Lord. There's another extended version that says, do not exasperate them to the point of resentment with demands that are trivial or unreasonable or humiliating or abusive or showing favoritism or showing indifference. So don't frustrate them with no-win scenarios. Instead, as you're developing these conversations with your kids, as you're connecting with them, you want to be in a role to where you're taking them by the hand and you're walking with them through life so they can see what it looks like to actually be following Jesus during all the different things that we're going to experience. And I think basically those two verses I just read boil down to the point that says, be the parent, be the adult. Be the adult in these situations to where when you are bumping heads and you're not seeing eye to eye, make sure you're handling things in a way that it doesn't anger your kids, it doesn't frustrate them. And again, I know they're going to be angry sometimes when we have to, when we have the authority to guide them and we want them to do something that's safe for them. But I think we can do it. I think we can all agree that we can do it in a way that is loving and caring, and we can get our kids to buy in even if they don't initially agree. Or we could do it in a real jerk way, in a way that does turn them off. And that's what Scripture is warning us about. Thinking about this idea that Deuteronomy tells us to have these conversations with our kids, not to frustrate them and to make them angry, and to have these conversations all day long. It's this idea from another leader that I've heard that said, kids don't need one 100-minute conversation on whatever it might be. Sex, drugs, family relationships, dating. They don't need one big long conversation and then have us say, oh good, we're done with that. What our kids need are 100 1-minute conversations. Having those small, quick, fast conversations that happen wherever it might happen, going to bed before they go to bed, or at the breakfast table, or dropping them off at practice, or as they're going out the door. And to have these short, small conversations all the time. If you're letting your kids know, I'm here for you. Conversations are important. I want to talk to you. And knowing that your kids, knowing that they can come to you anytime, that again is what it's going to build, that on-ramp of the conversations you can have with them to help teach them what it is we want them to know. As you start moving into this idea and you're thinking, yeah, Doug, like I know I need to do this. I know I want to do this. It's my kid's 13 or 14 and we haven't really had conversations before. I had the one sex conversation when they were in 5th grade and now we're done. And now you're telling me I have to keep having these conversations. How do I do that? It's going to be awkward. Yes, on one hand, it is going to be awkward. It's going to be hard to maybe start to develop these on-ramps of conversations with your kids when they're not used to having conversations with you. But one thing you could tell them, and I've done this a lot, and I've seen other parents who do it, is just name it. Be honest. If you're watching this because you want to connect with your kids, you want to have open conversations, you want to start building those on-ramps, but you really haven't done a lot of it in the past, then just go to your kids and tell them, hey, I need to do better as your dad. I want to have more conversations with you. I'm going to be asking you more questions. I'm going to be asking you what you think. I want to be sharing more of what I've been learning. And just name it and say, I want to have these conversations with you. And your kids, again, they might be a little weirded out at first, but push through. And eventually, I can almost guarantee you that they will cherish the time that you're willing to spend with them. Something that I've got to see, my kids are all older, and what's really nice is because we've laid the groundwork for these pathways, just to give you guys a little bit of hope. It's great because one of my kids has a really good friend who doesn't have the connection with her parents as my kid has with me and my wife. And my kid tells us that when she talks with her friend, my daughter will often say things like, oh, well, I got this big important thing coming up. I'm going to check with my mom and dad to see what they think. And her friend says, why would you want to talk to your mom and dad? You're 18, you're an adult, you're in college. Like, why don't you make your own decision? And my daughter says, well, because I know my mom and dad love me and I value their wisdom, and they're older, they're my parents, they've been through things, they know things. So we're able to enter into these conversations to help her as she moves into adulthood. But we definitely wouldn't have these conversations if years ago we didn't create those on-ramps. And we didn't have those continuous conversations with her about life and about all kinds of stuff. We wouldn't be where we are now. So I'm hoping that by implementing these on-ramps into your family rhythm and opening up these ways to have conversations with your kids will help you, so as they get older, they will come to you when they want to talk to you about things. I'm getting ready now to share a bunch of different ideas with you. This is just going to be a buffet. A lot of different little treats for you to choose from, and some of these might work for your family. Some of them you might listen to me and you think, that just doesn't fit the vibe of our family, and that's okay. But I just want to give you some actual things you can start doing that will help you create positive on-ramps so you can have healthy conversations with your kids.